the cursed mirror maze. It all started as an innocent adventure. A group of friends, Laura, Andrew, Helen, Victor, and Mike, were looking for something thrilling to do over the weekend. They were drawn to stories about the supernatural and mysterious. Someone mentioned a long-abandoned carnival on the outskirts of town, once popular but now the subject of urban legends. Rumor had it that the carnival was shut down after a series of mysterious disappearances, and since then, no one dared to go near it. Excited and intrigued, the friends decided that this would be the perfect place to test their courage. They were young, full of life, and felt invincible, scoffing at old tales. After packing the essentials, they set off toward the forgotten carnival, the thrill of the unknown buzzing in their veins. It was late afternoon when they arrived. A thick mist hugged the ground, giving everything an eerie, otherworldly feel. The carnival wasn't what they had imagined. The once vibrant structures now stood neglected, overgrown with vines and moss. Torn posters flapped in the wind, their faded colors barely hinting at the fun they once promised. The rusted creak of metal rides added a haunting soundtrack to the unsettling scene. The main entrance was half collapsed. A large archway bearing the words "Carnival of Wonders" was barely legible, with several letters missing or broken. But instead of deterring them, the atmosphere only fueled their curiosity. They stepped inside, joking nervously to mask their growing unease. As they explored the decaying attractions, one structure caught their eye, a mirror maze, surprisingly intact compared to the rest. It stood a little away from the main attractions, its dark glass and mirrors reflecting the dim light of the setting sun, creating an illusion of endless corridors. "This is awesome," Victor exclaimed. "There might still be something cool in there. Let's check it out." The idea appealed to the group, and they decided to enter the maze. They thought it would be easy and that they'd find the exit quickly. The maze welcomed them with mirror-lined walls, splitting the space into countless narrow corridors. At first, they laughed at how often they bumped into mirrors, fooled by the reflections in the dim light. But after a few minutes, things started to change. The deeper they went, the stranger the reflections became. The mirrors began to warp, distorting their faces, stretching or compressing their bodies in unnatural ways. Helen noticed that her reflection seemed to move even when she stood still. "Did that mirror just move?" she asked quietly, staring at her own image. "It's just old glass," Andrew reassured her, though he too felt something was off. They continued in silence, trying to find the way out, but with each step their anxiety grew. Suddenly, Laura heard footsteps behind her, but when she turned around, she saw only her friends and a maze of reflections. Uneasy, she studied the mirrored versions of them all, and suddenly, one in the farthest mirror moved out of sync with her own actions. It was almost imperceptible, but enough to send a chill down her spine. "Let's stick together," Mike suggested, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness. Yet the maze itself seemed determined to separate them, and soon they lost sight of each other in the twisted corridors. At first, they tried to stay together, but the maze seemed alive, shifting and warping to keep them apart. Victor noticed that the reflections in the mirrors were acting more erratically. He saw his reflection grin even though he hadn't smiled, and when he turned to call out to his friends, his reflection kept staring at him, its eyes cold and menacing. Suddenly, the mirrored hallways changed, and each friend found themselves alone. Laura felt like she was walking in circles. She saw her reflection ahead of her and then realized with horror that it had stopped mimicking her movements. The reflection stood still, then slowly began to approach her from the other side of the glass. Helen, meanwhile, found herself in a strange room where the mirrors covered not just the walls but the ceiling as well. Her reflections multiplied, and soon she could no longer tell which one was the real her. Then one of the reflected Helens started moving independently, staring at her with a predatory grin. Andrew watched as his reflection vanished from one of the mirrors, as if something had sucked his shadow away. He rushed to the mirror, but there was nothing but a cold, empty reflection staring back at him with a sinister smile. Panicked, he started running, but every time he thought he was nearing the exit, another mirror would greet him with that same unsettling grin. Each of them now understood these were no ordinary reflections. These were entities that had taken over their shadows and were now trying to replace them in the real world. Victor ran into Helen, but she was eerily silent and cold. When he got closer, he realized her eyes were filled with a dark, empty void. This wasn't Helen. It was her reflection, broken free from the glass. Andrew, feeling his reflection chasing him, sprinted through the maze but ended up at a dead end. There, dozens of his reflections waited, stepping out of the mirrors to surround him. He felt his mind being pulled into the depths of the mirrored labyrinth, becoming just another trapped reflection. Laura, realizing something was terribly wrong, tried to smash the mirror from which her reflection had emerged. As the glass shattered, she felt something dark retreat, but the maze remained unchanged. She was still trapped inside. They tried to find each other again, but each of them was trapped in their own personal nightmare. They could no longer trust the faces in the mirrors, which now wore twisted, malicious expressions. The maze seemed to close in around them, the mirrors shifting to leave less and less space to maneuver. Mike, the last one still somewhat in control, desperately searched for a way out, but realized the maze had locked itself around him. He felt himself losing touch with reality, and as his mind slipped into darkness, he understood he had become a part of the cursed place. Laura, feeling the oppressive weight of the labyrinth closing in on her, smashed mirror after mirror, but with each broken pane, new corridors opened up and new reflections appeared, hunting her down. In the end, she too gave in, feeling her shadow dissolve into the darkness of the maze. The last thing they each saw were their own reflections, which had finally fully taken their places in the real world. The maze fell silent, leaving only mirrors with countless distorted faces, no longer reflecting real people but the trapped souls within. The carnival remained abandoned, the mirror maze standing as a silent sentinel over the lost souls within. The legend of the maze lived on in urban folklore, warning new generations, but there were always those who thought it was just a scary story. No one knew what really happened to the friends who ventured there, and no one else dared to look for them. Since then, the mirrors remained cold and silent, but those trapped inside were left forever wandering the cursed corridors, forgotten but never truly lost to the maze.